beautiful friends and fellow word lovers. Welcome back to Pocket of Poetry. Today's video is going to be a review, but not just any review. Today I'm going to be talking to you guys about my favorite romance novel from my high school years. That novel is The Orchard by Lynn Jensen. I feel like it's just been forever since I sat in front of the camera, and I feel like I have so much to update you guys on. That's probably going to mostly be saved for another video, but I did just barely get back from a vacation, and I do have a new background with my new shelves. I'm just trying it out. I'm not committing to anything. It's turned out to be a little bit different than I thought as far as my reading goes. We'll be talking about it more in my next video, which is June wrap up, but I ended up rereading a book that I read so many times when I was younger, and I thought what a fun time it would be to just talk about it and review it and give you guys my thoughts on it now, several years later, what I think about this book. So I'll begin by telling you a story. This story takes place when I was 14 years old, about 8 years ago now. And I think that's how old I was when I first got this book. I vaguely remember I was in a bookstore with my grandma and I saw it. And for whatever reason, the cherries on the cover just spoke to me. Like, it just looked so cute, little heart with the stems. So I decided to grab it, and my grandma bought it for me, which was very nice of her. Shout out to her. And I took it home and probably read it within a matter of a few days, and since then read it multiple times throughout like my high school years. It's okay, so quick disclaimer about this book. This is a very wholesome, sweet romance novel. It is a religious romance novel as well. It's a lot of it has to do with the LDS Church, or also known as like Mormons. I'm just gonna be like referring to it as the church throughout this video because that's how they refer to it in the book, and that's also how I usually refer to it. So religious elements, I just wanted to put that out there. That is a big part of the book. So we begin our story of The Orchard with our main character, Alisen Embry, and she lives on her father's lake house next to her deceased mother's cherry orchard. She takes care of the cherry orchard. It's her life, it's her passion, it's her soul. I opened it up to the first page. I'd entirely forgotten what the first sentence was. Allow me to read it to you. I feel colorless, she whispered to the sunset. And when I read that first line, I was like, wow. I had completely forgotten that was the first line, and I absolutely love it. I think it's the best first line I've ever read. It's so perfect, you know, it's contemplative, it's deep, and yet it has that dramatic element that we all want when we're 14 and we're reading a romance novel. For the next part, it goes on to say, Alisen Embry at age 23 had climbed a tree again. So we have this book starting out with a 23-year-old woman sitting in a tree talking to the sunset about how she feels colorless. I just thought it was a great opening. 10 out of 10 for the opening. Honestly, no, it brought me so much joy when I read that because I had completely forgotten that that's how it started. Anyway, so Alisen goes on to bemoan the fact that her mother died 10 years ago when she was 13, leaving behind her cherry orchard and her psychopath husband, who is Alisen's father. So Alisen has two sisters, Elizabeth and Amanda. And after her mother died, Alisen's father sort of estranged Alisen from the family. He kind of started ignoring her, stopped really treating her like a daughter, and sort of just like ignored her. Whereas he treated her two sisters normally and kind of continued on with things as they had been before, kept acting like a father to them, he estranged Alisen. And the reason for that is because Alisen looks so much like her mother, that it was like too painful for him. Her father's name is Keith. It was too painful for Keith. The memory of his wife and seeing the memory of his wife and his young daughter was just too much. And so he sort of just like put a bunch of distance between himself and Alisen. So all these years Alisen has had emotional neglect from her father. Her mother died when she was young. And the only thing that she really had to remember her mother by was the cherry orchard that her mother loved so much and that she was actually in when she died. And so she decides to take over the cherry orchard. Her father's fine with it. He signs off on it. And this man named Jay, that's their neighbor, teaches Alisen everything he knows and kind of like helps her tend the orchard on herself. So we get this little backstory in the first chapter. And then we go on to find out that Keith Embry, her father, has been making some poor financial choices, and their family has sort of fallen into a difficulty with money, whereas before they were very rich. They have this huge lake house, they have this orchard, they have boats. Now they have to kind of downsize their lifestyle, and so it's revealed that Alisen has created this plan to rent out the lake house to a couple in order to make some extra money, and her father is going to relocate. So anyway, talks about that a lot, and then at the end of the first part of the book, we find out the name of the couple that's going to be renting the house, which is Marcus and Hannah Crawford. And Alisen, when she hears these names, she starts to panic, and she's instantly shuttled back to 4 years in the past. Then we flash back to 4 years ago, and we have Alisen at her high school graduation, just fresh out of high school, all her hopes and dreams, just right there. And receives, as a graduation present from her father, she receives a rowboat that says bowl of cherries on the side. And I honestly always thought that was so cute, because Alisen is portrayed as this very like simple, unassuming girl. She just wants a rowboat. Like her older sister Elizabeth asked for a nice sports car. She just wants a rowboat. That's all she wants. She's content with her orchard and her rowboat. And I just always thought that was very cute and sweet. And I think if I had read it now for the first time, I might find it a little cheesy, but this book is so steeped in nostalgia for me that I almost found that I couldn't really judge it as objectively as I would have liked to. But basically in her high school graduation, or at her high school graduation party, her old friend Jay, the guy who taught her everything he knows about the orchard, comes up to her and tells her that his nephew is staying for the summer and he would like to bring him over the next day to look at the orchard for research for a project he's working on. She says sure. So then the next day he brings his nephew over, who just happens to be a very handsome young man named Derick Whitney, who is interested in farming because he wants to do farming projects for people in third world countries to help them get food and what they need. And basically, in chapter 4 of this book, we have Derick and Alisen meeting for the first time. And let me just say, chapter 4 was the stuff from which my 14-year-old dreams were made. I loved this part so much. I reread this chapter so many times when I was young. Basically, we have it from Derick's perspective. He's getting out of the truck. He sets eyes on Alisen for the first time, and it's basically just love at first sight for both of them. Like, they have this instant connection, and they're like constantly looking at each other out of the corners of their eyes. Derick stopped mid-step. His mind took in the chocolate waves swinging loose across her forehead. I just picture, so this part of the book is set in like 2004. It's like set in the early 2000s. So I picture like those like swoopy bangs, that people used to do, where it was like comb over bangs. Didn't they do that? And like, maybe it wasn't that early. Maybe it was more like late 2010s that they did that. But I definitely pictured that. Swinging loose across her forehead, falling behind her shoulders in the sun. His mind processed the eyes as blue as the lake, framed in dark lashes. His gaze was drawn to her mouth, her lips turned up in a half smile. He blinked, and the girl turned her face up to Jay, who stood with one arm around her as he looked amusedly at Derick. Derick's mind told him he looked like an idiot. And basically just like from there, Derick is obsessed with her. And it's great. So Jay conveniently gets called away from them to go give someone a blessing. So he says, hey, why don't you guys stay here and like get to know each other a little bit, hang out, I'll be right back. And so Derick and Alisen end up taking the rowboat out, her graduation present. They end up going on this little rowboat ride. They have a picnic together. They get to know each other. They just have this instant magnetic connection. They talk about the church because, okay, so it's revealed that Derick and Jay, his uncle, are members of the LDS church. Alisen is not a member. She knew that Jay was like a member of a church, but she didn't really know much about it. So she starts asking Derick questions. They start talking about it, and it becomes clear that she's kind of interested in it. The part that I wanted to mention. So they go and they get back on the rowboat. And as they're getting back, they have this like intense, or he like helps her onto the rowboat, and they have like this intense moment of eye contact where they like almost kiss, but they don't. and it's like, you know, one of those. And I just wanted to read this part that I underlined because I just wanted to talk about it. So it says, this is from Alison's perspective now. She had almost kissed him right there when he was helping her into the rowboat. She'd never kissed a boy first in her life. She wasn't going, I don't know why I'm laughing. She wasn't going to start just because Derick Whitney was older, self-assured, refreshingly sincere, hot, and she could be wrong, but totally flirting with her. So that part, when I read it, I was like, it was like this weird like memory got unlocked for me, because I feel like there's, at least for me, I don't know if anybody else relates to this at all, but if you do, please let me know, because I just feel like when I was younger, every book, every movie, everything that I watched, everything that I was told, all this subliminal programming was centered around the fact that like the boy should kiss first, the boy should ask the girl out, the boy should pursue the girl. Like it just, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but I did, when I reread this, I was like, oh, I feel like this was like a part of like this whole like thing I had in my mind, that I like always expected a guy to kiss me first. I was younger, when I was in high school age, that did not really happen for me. Like I had guys that I had like things with, but they were always really like not like that at all. And so I feel like I had these expectations of like guys to like do all these romantic things and like, you know, even just kiss first, like even just that's not that high of an expectation, I feel like, but I always had that expectation, and like it didn't happen very often ever. So I was always just like, is something wrong with me? Like, you know. And I feel like a lot of that comes from like books like this, where it's always like the guy who just goes for the girl and just like does all these romantic things and just doesn't care. Anyway, that was a thought that came to me. I don't know if anybody else relates to that, or any other girl out there has ever felt like, is there something wrong with me because guys aren't like, you know, that like I feel like I was in so many situations where I was with a guy and I like knew that he liked me, like we were like had a thing or whatever, but he wouldn't kiss me, and like it would never happen. And I think that has to do with other factors as well, that I'm not going to get into, but it was just interesting. Anyway, let me know. So yes, basically father comes home for the day and asks her to go out to dinner with him. Her two sisters are gone, it's just the two of them, and he asks her to go out to dinner, and she's like shook because her father has not reached out to her to like show affection or love towards her in a really long time. And so she's really confused, and he ends up taking her out to dinner, kind of like talking to her about like her future. Alison has already made the decision that she's going to be going to community college and studying business, but he's trying to kind of subtly convince her to like apply to a bigger college. He's like, it's not too late to apply to a bigger college. And so you can tell he's kind of trying to like get his influence in now that she's older. Honestly, psycho. Like he's not a good person. But I did want to share this quote from page 39. When she's with her dad at dinner, he says, "What kind of day have you had?" And they're like having a really awkward conversation because obviously they don't talk very much. What kind of day have you had? She blinked at the question. What kind of day? And then she thinks this. It's been amazing. Astounding, startlingly glorious and breathtaking, somehow deeply spiritual and absolutely exhilarating. And then she says, I took the rowboat out. But like, that whole quote, I was just like, wow. Like, it's just a little over the top with the whole, because she literally met Derick for like a few hours ago, and she's already like, wow, it was like spiritual and deeply spiritual. I'm like, really? It was deeply spiritual? Okay. So then after this happens, Jay tells Derick and Alison that Alison deserves a break after all her hard work because she graduated and because she's been working so hard in the orchard. So he gives her a week off, and he's like, I'll take care of the orchard. You and Derick just like have fun and get to know each other for the week. And so basically from there, things escalate very quickly with Alison and Derick. They basically fall head over heels in love with each other. And they go on the first day, they go on this hike, and she takes him to this rock where her mom took her and her sisters when she was little to tell them stories. And she like is vulnerable and like opens up to him about it and like tells him about her father and stuff. And then that's when they have their first kiss, which Derick does kiss first. I'm like almost positive. This great week together, they get to know each other. They have a great time. They're still trying to get involved in her life. He's still kind of trying to, he sees that she's with this guy, this farm boy, and he doesn't really take it seriously at first. He's like, whatever, it's just a fling. But he decides to like take her and her sister out to like Glacier National Park for the day. Like he does all these nice things to like try and kind of win her over. And he finds out that anyway, so then some of his friends start convincing him that like Mormonism is terrible and like don't let your daughter date a Mormon, she'll be dragged off into this cult, and like they start like kind of convincing him that this is not a good idea. So then he kind of starts to panic about Derick, freak out about the whole situation. So the next part that I wanted to talk about is Alison's older sister Elizabeth, who honestly is such an iconic character. She's such a mood. She works in the fashion industry. It's super vague about what her job actually is, but it says that she works in the fashion industry. She's always traveling. She lives part-time in New York, part-time at home in Montana, which is where Alison's family lives. And she is just this really glamorous. She has all these on and off relationships with men. She's so fashionable because she's in the fashion industry. And at this one point she comes home and she and Derick have a little accidental run-in at the lake, and there's this whole like kind of comedic scene because she's wearing a very scanty outfit / swimsuit. She's got like a little cover up on. It doesn't really describe what she's wearing, but it just says it's very scandalous and like she's not wearing a lot. And so Derick is like super awkward. He's like looking at the sky, looking at the ground because he feels so awkward by what she's wearing. Purity culture alert, just kidding. But no, it's really funny because like Derick is like painted to be this really pure, like, you know, wholesome guy, and then he sees Elizabeth in her little skimpy swimsuit and she's kind of flirting with him, and so it's like this really funny scene. So I've been editing this video for the past hour and really it's got nothing going for it, but this part of the book where Elizabeth and Derick encounter each other for the first time is honestly great. It's pure gold from start to finish. So instead of continuing on this narrative, I'm just going to read it to you, okay? So maybe this video will be a chaotic mess that will make no sense at all, but I'm okay with that. Footsteps sounded along the dock, and he started to say something about dinner as he turned, but it wasn't Alison. This girl was tall, blonde, tan, and wearing, well, not much, and sunglasses. Not much and sunglasses. He quickly turned back to the lake. Who is that? Amanda? He glanced sideways. Nope, not Amanda. This woman could not be in high school. Then it dawned on him. The other sister, Elizabeth. Alison had mentioned Elizabeth was coming home. And who are you? She pulled off I should get some sunglasses. She pulled off her sunglasses. Elizabeth Embry looked like her father, and she knew it looked good on her. He cleared his throat and almost held out his hand, but thought better of it. He folded his arms instead. Okay, it just occurred to me how weird that is that he didn't want to shake her hand. He's like, I'm not gonna shake your hand. You're too scantily clad. I can't touch your hand. I'm Derick. I'm just waiting for Alison. Alison, huh? She eyed him from head to toe and back up again, holding the tip of her sunglasses to her mouth. Her hair swung around as she looked back up to the house, then back to Derick. She shrugged. So, Derick, what do you do? She bent down to remove her sandals, and he suddenly had nowhere to look. He concentrated on the sky. I'm a student at UM, but I'm working here. She flipped her hair as she looked back up at him. Eyes again. For the summer. She perused him like a purchase she was considering. Too bad. Stepping away, she pulled off what he was surprised to see was a cover-up of some sort. He put his hands on his hips and turned to face the lake again. He sincerely hoped she didn't remove any more layers. There was a splash, and she was in the water. He exhaled and his shoulders sagged with relief. Hey, Derick, she called from the water. Come on in. She executed some backstrokes. The water's amazing. I'll just wait for Alison, thanks. He watched the house. Suit yourself. After a few more minutes and no sign of Alison, Elizabeth swam back to the dock. My sister seems to have forgotten you. She started to pull herself up the ladder, out of the water. What a shame. Maybe I'll go see where she is. He quickly turned toward the house, but halted. Alison was already coming down the dock, but had stopped, her mouth open. Derick threw out his hands in a helpless gesture, then threw them back toward Elizabeth. who had finished her climb out of the water and was walking his way. The fact that he went, like, wow, a little dramatic, Derick. He kept his eyes on Alisen as Elizabeth reached for his towel, still tossed over his shoulder. Alisen's eyes widened as Elizabeth toweled off, then threw the towel back over Derick's shoulder, sideswiping his face. He looked up at the sky as Elizabeth slipped her sandals back on, using his shoulder to balance herself, then picked up her article of clothing and sunglasses and started walking toward Alisen. Nice, swim thing, Elizabeth. Did you find that in France? Derick could hear them, but still looked up, hands on his hips. Spain. Nice, friend Alisen. Did you find him in the orchard? Then she called, Thanks, Eric. He lifted his hand high to acknowledge the thanks, but he still stared at the sky. Elizabeth paused and then said just loud enough for him to hear, Too bad. So there you go. That's the scene. And I think it's great because of how Derick it's constantly reassuring the reader that Derick is looking at the sky. He's looking at the ground. He's not looking at her. And I just think that's really funny. So I guess my concluding thoughts are this book has a lot of, really at its heart, it just is trying to be a sweet, wholesome little book. There's nothing wrong with it, but I do think that this scene in particular is really funny just because of how hard it's trying. And I think that nowadays a book like that, a scene like that, would be just torn to shreds by this world. So I hope that you all, what am I even trying to say? I don't know. This video makes no sense. Like, I've been trying to make sense of it. It's just not working. And I just don't know why I thought anyone would care about me ranting about this book for 30 minutes. So if you're still watching, I hope you are liking it, and my next video will be a lot better, hopefully. So